So I've had this really dumb idea rattling around my head for like a year or two at this point of what if you had a clock, but it was a really bad clock because every time it wanted to display like what time it was, it had to roll like a dice to show you what the time was. Um, so I made it. This is what it currently looks like, prototype one. There's three pods. There's a D12 that shows you what hour. I just did it as a 12-hour clock to make it a little bit easier for it to get the right time. There is a D6 that provides the tens place of the minutes. The 6 is just being used to represent a 0, and then a D10 to represent the ones. And then it can flip them each pod independently, trying to get the right number to display the appropriate time. So quick little demo, maybe. Oh no, I'm having tech issues too. That's actually, let's see. All right, we got there. So yeah, it literally has to just keep flipping until it gets the number that it wants to get to show you what time it is. Luckily, on a per minute change or whatever, it only needs to flip usually the ones place. And I did make it more tolerant that if it gets the right number or the right number plus one, both of those are acceptable. So it doesn't have to always get the exact right number. Otherwise, it might take forever.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and then it theoretically would rotate the dice to make it more visible to you, so you always can see it like looking at normal. The logic for that's a little bit screwed up, so kind of just like randomly rotate it. It's not always the most useful rotation. Otherwise, it's kind of hard to see like on the just like straight pictures. So I went ahead and pulled up my CAD drawings for it just because like the false colors and whatnot, it makes it a lot easier to like see the contrast. So this is what it looks like under that shell, and that you have these three pods. I can even probably get like a little laser pointer. You have these three pods. The camera can see these mirrors that are angled up to look at the bottom of the dice. So it's actually only ever looking at the bottom of the dice. So that way it can then you are looking at the top. And then there's a flipper mechanism to flip the dice up. You can see a cross-section view of the flipper. So you can see that you have your mirror that's looking up through a view plate. This is where your dice is sitting in here. And then it just kind of pulls a plunger down with a solenoid that causes the flip mechanism to happen. So yeah, so this is what the camera sees. It's a terrible little image with lots of graininess and JPEG compression artifacts. But it basically crops out each one of the little dice as so. And then it extracts the red channel because I'm just using an orange LED. I have a million of them later on. I'm not even sure where they showed up from. I just like was looking through my stock and I just had a bag of like 100 orange LEDs. So I just used them. So we extract the red channel, pretty good contrast on that. So we do the extraction, then we threshold, and then we do some basic like, what's the biggest blob in the middle of the screen? So that way we can kind of get rid of any other artifacts that might have survived the thresholding process. And then we do a weird thing. This is the image that's actually used for matching. So this is what's called a polar transform. I learned about this over the course of this project. So what we do is we take an image and then effectively imagine if there was like, took a cut here and then we unwrapped the image. We rolled it out. And I tried to make like a little visualization of what's happening, but I don't know. I don't think the visualization ended up as clear as I hoped it would. But we effectively are unrolling this image into a new representation. Why do we do that? So it makes a pretty good way to store the templates. So the system doesn't know what dice color or what dice it's looking at. It doesn't know what numbers are. It is literally a template match. So it's of the templates that I know about for this dice, all the faces of this dice, which is the template that matches the best. The problem is that my templates or like my images as they come in, I have no idea what the rotation of the dice is at that moment in time. So with a polar transform, any rotation is actually a translation. So this visualization is better. And then if we basically do a linear sweep of our image against the template, one of them should line up really, really well compared to the others. And so that way we can figure out which dice stace we are looking at. For the total, for all 3 dice, for all the templates that I'm storing, it's 40K of storage. This is done on ESP32 where I have megabytes of flash to store in. So again, it's a very efficient like storage mechanism. Hardware review for the nerds. I ran this on the ESP32 with a 2 megapixel camera. I actually did this one with power delivery. So it's a USB-C cord, that plugs in. And then it negotiates for a 12-volt supply off of your USB power delivery like charger or your USB battery bank. And so it's just the one power supply that provides 12 volts, and then I step that 12 volts down to 5 volts for the servos and for the microcontroller. Which then I guess the microcontroller is stepping down to 3.3, but that's on it. It's just push-pull solenoids. Actually, I've never actually used those in a project before, so it was just kind of fun to use them for once. And then I just grabbed some continuous rotation servos to do the rotation of the dice. You don't really need it to be a servo. It's just those are a really simple little package where it's a high torque motor that is very, very simple to drive. Requires basically no extra hardware, just a little package with a little motor, and you send a signal to go left or right, basically. I played with a couple flipper iterations. So this first one you can see is it does not get too much to height, but if you change the geometry of where the flipper is, you can get much more dramatic flips. So the flipper in use is a version of that second one. I cheated to make the vision process simpler. One, I took the dice and I actually went in and repainted the numbers to be a much stronger white color to get a stronger contrast. And then if you see, I actually went and filed little channels between like either the numbers or like the little tabs that like give the underlines. So that way I don't have to like look for, both the blob and like a corresponding piece. It's just what's the biggest blob in the center of the frame. And why this really matters is certain orientations of the dice will create these huge glare lines with the illumination. And so it comes in really strong here. And so if you're trying to be like, what's the biggest blob and like a close blob to it that might be relevant, it's becomes harder to like get rid of these bars. And these bars change based on like the rotation of the dice. So the glare, that line can either be really short or it can be really long. And so like it becomes harder logically to get rid of. And I wasn't using like an actual vision library. This is all coded directly. Yeah. I was very much entertained with this idea. It was just in my head of what if it was really noisy and obnoxious? Practically for long term, that's actually really sucks. So initially I had this on electromechanical relays. So you have like a defined click click as the solenoids were firing just from like the solenoids being powered. I went ahead and switched those to solid state relays. I would imagine I can probably make like some like foam dice or like TPU dice. I was talking with Thomas Spencer's significant other of because she makes dice, and so we were talking through some ideas of how we can maybe try to make some quieter dice. The solenoids, there's a definite like snap as it hits the end of its travel. That again can also be fixed just by like I can actually play with like the duration of time. So instead of being like, hey, fire all the way and it goes all the way to the end, if you fire and then you stop pulling on the solenoid before it reaches the end of its travel, it'll start slowing down and it won't like slam against the wall as much. I just haven't played too much with that yet. And then the servos, I don't know if you ever heard of servo. Like they have a definite like noise to them. They're not the quietest mechanisms. A lot of other motor solutions would be quieter. So as it's rotating the dice, that'd be a lot quieter. Right now, to get time, the ESP32, while it has a real-time clock module, it does not work when you power off the system. And so it boots up, it connects to Wi-Fi, and it grabs internet time. So it would be nice if it had like a battery backup, like little real-time clock modules. So that way it could be fully offline and not actually require the internet for time. And then if you saw from the image way at the beginning, and actually I've got it right here on my desk. So you can see how the dice are kind of like recessed down into the chamber. It would be nice if they were like a lot higher up and a lot more prominent. But because of how I designed the flipper and it's an up flipping mechanism, I have to have them set fairly far down so that way the flipper has movement to travel before it hits the glass wall. I should not have done this on an ESP32. That made this so much more painful than it ever had it needed to be. debugging a camera on an embedded like system that's not like a Raspberry Pi or like something with an OS really sucks. Where if I had done this on a Raspberry Pi, I literally could have just like, oh, like I'm not sure what this, the bits of this frame look like, and I could have just dumped it to a file and went and looked at it. Where by doing it on the ESP32, it became a much bigger issue of like, how do I get a frame off this thing that's the actual frame that it's seen at this instant in time? I had a lot of memory issues because images take a lot of memory to like process, and the ESP32 will just like crash, and you have to be like, oh, this is probably because the stack blew, not, and it doesn't say that it's a stack fault. It'll just be like, hey, I had a instruction error. You're like, wait, that's kind of weird. And it takes a while to like kind of figure out what's happening. I had all these pieces working in individual pieces, and then it's like, all right, let's integrate it all together. It'll be real fast, no big deal. Yeah, integration hell exists, and even if you think that this is time that you're going to avoid it, you won't. And then I had a lot of issues with the camera getting good enough data off of it, and hence why I started doing things like filing the dice. It's just, if you're trying to get something done in a reasonable time frame, maybe try to simplify your problem a little bit just to make it a little bit easier.